Alright, so now I have both my front and my back pattern piece with seam allowances drawn around them. And now I just want to check really quick to make sure that everything is nice and true. So one thing that I mentioned earlier that are the length from the knee to the crotch on the front and the back is going to be different. So I'm just going to match those up at the knee point, match them at the crotch point. Actually get rid of some of my line right here. And now I just want to make sure that there's one continuous curve that goes from the front to the back. It ends up being just about 1/8 of an inch shorter, so it's not much. And then if we, sometimes what I'll do is I'll clip my seam allowance down here so I can fold this, fold the seam allowance away. And then you can really see here we have a nice smooth curve. It doesn't come up to a point. It's almost a straight line through there. When I put my ruler or a straight edge along there, you can see how it doesn't point up and it doesn't point down, so there's just a nice curve across there. So now we're going to true that seam allowance on the back piece. It's going to just come down a little bit. The seam allowance I've chosen to do for these patterns is 3/8 of an inch, but that could vary depending on the type of serger that will construct the garment. For the one that I'm going to use for the mock-ups, it's going to be 3/8 of an inch, so it'll be perfect for my machine. So a couple other things we want to look at. We want to fold our pattern pieces in half again on that grain line. And they should be symmetrical below the knee. We'll notice that on the back, the crotch is going to definitely extend past there, and that's just fine. Same with on the front. My pattern should be symmetrical below the knee, and my patterns are. Alright, so a couple other things to consider. For these patterns, we've chosen to leave them how they are, but for some patterns, for more of an aesthetic look, you might choose to shave off about 1/4 inch all the way down the side seam of the back pants pattern and add 1/4 inch to the front pants pattern. So what that does is it will just shift the side seam towards the back a little bit, so when you're looking straight onto a person you don't actually see the side seam. We're going to leave it like this because these are going to become working patterns. The other thing that I've done, I did not in my seam allowance allow for a fold over waistband because I'm betting that this pant is probably going to come up higher than any of our style lines, so we're fine to just go with this, and as we fit on our models we'll move where the style line goes, and then we'll do different seam allowances based on whatever type of waistband we do. I did go ahead though and put a 1-inch extension for my cuff, and for that this is a little bit different than what you would do with a woven. You actually go at a 90-degree angle straight down, and it is just a squared off hem, whereas with a woven you would sew a return, you would pattern a return. This just helps the pant lay better. You also don't want to though go straight down from your design line because then it'll taper in too far. So it's just a right angle from the bottom of the pant. We're also going to wait on truing up at the hip. So right now they match and it's the same length from the hip of the front and the back. We might have a little bit of a funny shape where they meet, but that's something that we're going to true up on the model. And again, these pants are going to probably come up a lot higher than any of the style lines that we're going to have. Now, we do want to add a couple of notches to make sure our front and our back are going to match together. We're going to use our perpendicular line at our knee on both the front and the back, on the inside inseam and the side seam. Also, the point we had earlier, point G, so it's 2/3 of the way down in between B and D. So it's 2/3 of the way down from the waist to the hip, and we have that on both of our pattern pieces. So I'm going to just mark some nice notches in, and then we can go ahead and notch them with a notcher as well. I don't really need to draw anything in at the knee. We also, on the front and the back, crotch, we want to mark notches. Now, typically, as a rule, the front crotch is always going to have either, it often will have 2 notches, and the back will have 3, leaving single notches for our side seams. So just a little bit above our crotch curve here on the front, we're going to just draw in 2 notches. And on the back, in about the same area, we're going to draw in 3 notches. And we can just go ahead and notch these out.
So that's 1 notch on side seams, 2 notches on the front, and then 3 on the center back.
Yeah, and you'll see different combinations, but typically there's the most in the center back, the least on the side seam. So that's just kind of a rule that I have always done. So it's just best to, if you just do the same thing every time, then you'll know what you normally do, and it just makes it easier on yourself. So this pattern is now ready to be sewn up and tested on our model. And then this is what we'll use. Once we get this basic pattern, we can do all sorts of different variations. We can do lots of different waistband applications and all different style lines in our pants. But if we can just get the basic thing fitted, then we can always go back to this to start a new design.
Sounds good.